Overlord. Volume 14, Chapter 4, Well-Prepared Traps, Part 3. Climb, Renner, and Brain were informed by the few remaining knights that there were guests expecting them after they had returned to the palace. Blue Rose had requested an audience. Under normal circumstances, they would have been brought to this room immediately, but the trio's current outfits were hardly appropriate. Especially Renner, whose clothes said handmaiden more than princess. They were absolutely soaked with sweat. The knights were instructed to bring them in after an hour to give the three enough time to fix their appearances. The Ch4 Kingdom's army was in formation outside of the capital and could attack at any time. For the capital and the castle's defense, knights were being moved back and forth. That was why they had to take care of the menial tasks, because none of the maids were there. Most of the maids who attended to the palace were the daughters of noblemen. They had run away from the palace to their family's mansion. Whether that was the safer option remained to be seen. He had heard from his master, Renner, that the atrocities the Ch4 Kingdom's army had committed along their way towards the capital will most likely be committed here too. That was a logical deduction. Nowhere within the capital was safe now. So what could one do to guarantee their safety? Renner had responded to this question with the gambit of leaving the capital. Because of that, Climb and Brain had discussed in secret about arranging a carriage outside of the palace. If Renner decided to run away, it could prove useful. Of course, he knew that Renner did not intend to run at all, yet he could not definitely say that she would not change her mind. This was just a plan in case she does. Climb prepared water and a towel for Renner to wipe away her sweat. Normally he would have prepared a bath for her, but they only had an hour, so that was off the table. Since the maids weren't there, Climb had no choice but to help groom Renner. The duty to prepare tea then fell on Brain. The scene of the swordsman flipping through cabinets trying to find tea was honestly hilarious, even though he felt sorry for him. After Renner had wiped off her sweat and applied perfume to herself, while she picked out her gown, the two men took a shower. Unlike women, unlike the princess, the two men readied themselves through much simpler processes. They undressed, let water take its course down from the top of their heads, and wiped themselves off. A secondary rinse later and they were all done. Sure, they had to change into clean clothing too, but the entire process took no longer than 10 minutes for the two. An hour that felt shorter than it should passed by and the three were ready. Renner seemed to have picked up on some unpleasant smells as she sniffed her hair and wrist. Climb could not smell the scent of sweat, but he could faintly smell the scent of the oil and smoke that had been infused into her hair when she cooked. It should not have been as noticeable after it mixed with the scent of her perfume. The knights not only led Ch4 in. The entirety of Blue Rose was present. Ch4 was the only one in a gown, the rest of them were in combat gear. It looked like they were the bodyguards of a noblewoman. Climb was a little shocked. Indeed, Ch4 did not come over by herself normally, but it was rare to see all of them together. This might have been the first time they came all together. You have taken time out of what little you had, yet I still made you wait. I am terribly sorry for that. No, it is fine. I did not inform you of my arrival earlier, so this was an impromptu visit. I should be the one to thank you for taking the time to meet us. There is no need for tea. We do not have that much time after all. Just as Renner was about to steep the tea that Brain had procured, Ch4 stopped her. Oi, Ch4. I feel like we should have enough time to drink a cup of tea, right? The one who spoke was Evil Eye. The rest of Blue Rose nodded along in agreement, causing a shocked expression to surface on Ch4's face. Everybody wants to drink tea. Evil Eye sighed heavily on purpose. The princess has been so gracious to welcome guests who had barged in without warning with tea. Would our leader be so cruel as to refuse her offer? What an indifferent fellow. Oi, musclehead. She received no response from Kugane. Although the gazes of everybody in the room were affixed on Kugane, she pretended that she had heard and seen nothing at all. Oi, you there with the coy expression, Woman who'd sink straight to the bottom if she fell into the sea. She was indeed being completely ignored. Evil Eye sighed loudly in response to her behavior. Oi, Gagaran. Oi. Oh. What? What do you need me for? What's going on, Evil Eye? You want to drink something too, right? Ah, yes. I feel like gulping down a large amount of liquid. I could probably drink 10 liters if I had to. What even, do you know how much time you've wasted just to hear me say that, whatever. Regardless of how much there is, boss, can we get some too? Hey of course it's fine, are you drinking too, Evil Eye? Lake Yus' eyes widened as she spoke. Indeed, if Evil Eye were to drink too, Climb would be as surprised as she was. To drink the tea, she would have to take off her mask, but as far as Climb knew, this magic caster did not take off her mask under any circumstances. Evil Eye did not reply to her question, but only shrugged as if to say no. Well then, we shall steep the tea while the boss and princess talk. I guarantee the tea will be richer than you could dream of. Eh? You have already poured it into a warm bottle, huh? Lake Yus said with a shocked expression as Tia nodded. We might not have enough considering the amount of people here. We'll see. Tia began pouring the tea, but her movements were so unrefined that most of the tea split onto the saucer. This country's tea culture did not dictate that tea should be drunk from the saucer, which was why Lake Yus was furrowing her brows. Just as she had said, the warm bottle did not hold nearly enough liquid for the 8 occupants of this room. No need for me, right? Ah, same here. Climb refused a cup after Brain did so too. That did not mean that they had enough tea for the rest of them. Even when those 2 were factored out, the amount of tea they had was still inadequate for 6 people. We rarely get to drink this, you guys are seriously being ungrateful. Could you really consider the offering of tea to be an act of good grace? Something just didn't sit right with that definition. After pouring 5 servings of tea, Tia swung the warm bottle around as if to emphasize the fact that it was empty. Ah, it's empty, what a shame we don't have nearly enough, especially with this 10-liter drinking gal around. Tia flashed a glance at Tina. Wouldn't rumors spread that the 3rd princess doesn't even have enough tea to adequately serve her guests? Lake Yus rubbed her glabella as Renner laughed, Yufufu. Now that is troubling. Although, in times like these, it is probably unwise to maintain the image of a lavish lifestyle. But I do think there is a need to demonstrate that the royal family still has a future. So, should I steep more tea? Give it a rest, Renner. Lake Yus. There's a limit to how much you could remain beholden to everyone's goodwill, you know. Lake Yus was incredulous as Renner gave a wry smile. Should I spell it out for her? Miss Evil Eye. Looks like she's starting to understand. Please do educate our hard-headed leader. Very well then. The final moments will be upon us soon after all. Everybody is just trying to buy as much time for the both of us as possible. Ah, so that's why. Climb finally understood now that she had put it that way. Normally, adventurers could not participate in wars. This was a measure put in place to prevent higher casualty counts than normal. However, since the enemy this time around was the undead and had committed massacres on a massive scale, the Adventurers Guild of the Kingdom had accepted the royal request to classify this war as an acceptable quest. Just as the case was during Jaldabaoth's demonic disturbance, the guild had approved the mobilization of its members. The exact details of how they would operate was entirely left up to the adventurers' discretion. Some had even chosen to join the ranks of the army that was sent out nearly a week ago, from which none had returned. A few of the other teams had chosen to make their last stand inside of the capital. There were some high-tier teams that had gone missing in the midst of this. Perhaps they had accepted the invitation of the theocracy or had snuck out and fled from the capital of their own volition. Lake Yus and her team, Blue Rose, were one of the teams that had decided to make their last stand at the capital. They had just received intel that the Sorcerer King's army had set up camp near the capital, Lake Yus, and the rest of them should not be squandering away what precious time they had left. Yet still, Lake Yus consciously found time to meet with her friend, Renner. Considering that it was extremely likely they were 100% certain that this was the last time she could meet with Renner. The truth was, she had already prepared tea for 5 servings for Evil Eye, Gagaran, Tia, Tina, and of course, the one being handed to Climb. Yet, it seemed that none of them was planning to drink it. If they had told Lake Yus outright that she should allocate time to bid her farewells with her friend, she would have definitely rejected that notion based on her personality alone. If they phrased it as her having a cup of tea with her buddies, however, she would probably be much more receptive to the idea. Her companions were just being considerate. So, Brain Unglouse. I want to make tea for the remaining few, who must be terribly parched at this point. Show me the way to where the water is boiled. Oh. It's this way. That was probably why Tina and Tia managed to get the better bodyguard of the two out of the room. Should I leave too? Oh, don't mind it. That wasn't why they led him away. Climb asked Evil Eye only to receive an answer in the negative. Climb was a bit confused. So they weren't trying to grant Renner and Lake Yus more privacy by getting everyone else out of the room. Gagaran and Evil Eye did not seem to want to leave at all. Did she really only want him to lead her to where the water was boiled then? Since everybody has insisted, let us chat a little before the tea is ready. Before that, I have a question. Where were you just then? If you were busy preparing for what is to come, then I will just leave. Do you know of the orphanage that I established? I had just returned from cooking there. Huh? Cooking? At times like these. Lake Yus vocally expressed her shock. Climb was surprised too when Renner had asked him to prepare the carriage so that she could go cook for those children. However, upon arriving at the location and seeing the state of the place, Climb knew that she had made the right decision. Yes. The Sorcerer King's army had surrounded the capital for a few days now, plus the army that was sent out a few days back had also used up a sizable amount of food. Our rations have only been dwindling down day by day. That was why I took some of the food stored here to cook a meal for them. The orphanage did not have much food left. Moreover, the price of food has risen due to the worsening situation in the capital, so the orphanage could no longer sustain its own operations. It had no choice but to decrease the amount of meals per day as well as the amount of food the children received per meal. That was why she chose to cook for them, since she was already there to secretly supply them with food anyways, and plus it was a rare opportunity for her too. Renner's mutters began to flash through Climb's mind. Renner, as she cooked for the children with her well-learned culinary skills, had said, I wanted to distribute grain to everybody, but we don't have much left. I'm such a hypocrite. Faced with the Sorcerer's Kingdom's army which had already defeated the kingdom's 400,000 men strong army, they had no hope to stand against them. The capital was fated to fall and so was the royalty. Yet, no matter how hard he tried to convince the gentle Renner to run away, she would not budge at all. Stuck between his loyalty and his own feelings, Climb felt a suffocating pain in his heart. However, he could not allow the two in front of him to sense that under any circumstances. Climb forcefully suppressed the pain that felt like it could tear him apart. You might be the only royal in history to know how to cook. I do not think so. There must have been others, just not recorded in the history books was all. Those children must be enjoying their meals right now, it was worth it. Originally, Renner's cooking was meant to be everybody's lunch, but in order to prevent the children from fighting over the food or the employees choosing to go without for them, she had even cooked side dishes to go along with the entree. Everybody there must be satiating themselves right now. She had cooked so much that dinner should have also been taken care of for them. Speaking of which, Renner, who couldn't even peel a potato before, had seamlessly improved her cooking abilities by quite a margin. The thinness of peelings she could achieve nowadays was honestly amazing. This woman, who glistened in radiant light in his eyes, appeared to be naturally talented for the culinary arts. Renner seemed to have noticed Climb's revenant gaze, and smiled in response. It was such a warm and welcoming smile. Those two's conversation was filled with optimistic topics, perhaps they were subconsciously avoiding the discussion of their inevitable fate. Or rather, was it precisely because they knew what fate awaited them that they avoided talking about it? Not long later, Tia returned alone with the warm bottle. "Where's Mr. Unglaus and Tina?" "Those two went looking for desserts to pair with the tea, so I came back first." "Desserts?" Lakyus half squinted at Tia. "That would have been appropriate if we were the one to bring some along." "I do not mind, so it is fine. I should have baked plenty of pastries back then to serve as backup food. Since I added a lot of sugar in them, they could be used as desserts." "See. Even the princess agrees." "CRONI boss is just being extra. Also, this is the first time I have tried steeping tea." TL's note, original was vs. Tealing it into a pun to preserve the nuance. The tea that flowed out of the warm bottle was excessively thick. "Hey. ONI boss. It feels nice to down it in one gulp. It's got a clean texture." "Thank you. The taste is honestly excellent. I suppose your highness the princess would not need my recommendation." "Please have my share too, it cooled down already." Tia placed her filled cup of tea in front of Renner. Such a breach of etiquette angered Lakyus somewhat, but Tina kept silent anyways. Climb felt that he should also keep his mouth shut. Lakyus picked up her cup and breathed in the fragrant smell. Her expression became twisted. The taste was too strong. "Don't mind it?" "Of course I would mind. This is the first time I've drank such a strong tea." "How many leaves did you add?" Hey. I know you said this was your first time, but there's no need to quiver with such excitement." So that was why they were looking for desserts, to balance the flavor. Understandable. "Renner, you were right to not drink it." "How rude. Not even the term ONI could do you justice, ONI boss." "Hey just try to make something more edible next time." Lakyus picked up her cup and slipped from the corner of her lips. Her expression twisted into something resembling the character. Just how thick was the tea? Tia, who stood next to Lakyus, stole glances at her and asked in a matter-of-fact tone, "Is it tasty?" If I am being honest, it is too bitter. I would not call it good hue." Lakyus' expression began to contort. She pushed Tia aside and held onto her stomach. The items on the table shook as she wobbled. In the midst of the chaos, Climb finally noticed that Lakyus' gown had been stained red. A thin, stick-like object had been thrust through her. He could not comprehend what had happened. His brain could not accept what he was seeing right now. Who would have thought that Lakyus would be penetrated by Tia? Lakyus was also in a confused state, not even casting healing magic on herself. It was as though she was trying her best to understand what was happening. Gagaran ran to Lakyus' side. Climb thought that she was rushing over to help, but things turned out for the worse as Gagaran struck Lakyus' stomach with a heavy punch. Lakyus remained defenseless against that attack, thinking that her companion was rushing over to help her. Gagaran struck her in the stomach with the force of a battering ram. "Oof. Let me do it." Tia impaled Lakyus with a new spike as the air was knocked out of her, rendering her unable to breathe. His eyes did not deceive him, there was some sort of liquid at the tip of the spike. It must have been some sort of poison. "Your Highness." Climb tugged Redner's hand, hid her behind his frame, and moved towards one of the corners. Tia and Gagaran ignored him entirely, choosing to repeatedly attack Lakyus instead. Lakyus tried her best to dodge their attacks, but faced with the duo's combos she could not even properly defend herself, Never mind dodging. The gearless Lakius could not put up an effective resistance against the fully geared Tia and Kugane. Climb angrily yelled towards the silent spectator, "Evil Eye! What in the world is going on? Don't move. Otherwise I would not only target you with my magic, but the princess as well." Climb was about to draw his sword but stopped himself when he saw that Evil Eye had raised a hand in his and Redner's direction. He naturally should be assisting Lakius, but Renner was more important to him. Protecting Renner took absolute priority. Climb wanted to lead Renner out of the room, but the moment he moved a crystal short sword was embedded by his foot. "Don't move. Do not leave this room. If you disobey me, I'll hack off one of the princess' legs. As long as you listen to me, I will not harm you." Climb was powerless in the face of Evil Eye's threats. "If I rendezvoused with Brain, if I informed Tina of the current situation," while Climb pondered, the unusual situation among the members of Blue Rose continued to unfold. Tia appeared to be muttering something to Lakius. "I've been making observations for quite a while now, looking for ways to kill Lakius. Normal methods would be resisted, so a combination of magic and poison would have to be used. That is the only way to do it. Surely not even you could resist the effect of multiple poisons simultaneously, right? Evil Eye, it's your turn." "All right." Confused, groveling, and saddened. Pain was not the only thing conveyed through Lakius' expression. What stood out amongst them all was her inability to understand what was happening at all. Evil Eye cast the spell at her. "I get it. Resist weakening. No use." She resisted it? TL's note, would have went with resistance weakening, but the English in the furigana has spoken. What even? Kugane landed yet another hit on Lakius' belly, the part of her body that she had minimized her own stature to protect, like a turtle retreating into its shell. Tia took out a new needle and stabbed it into Lakius without any hesitation. "Resist weakening, all right. Now then, charm person. Done. Good job, you two. We did it." Kugane and Tia pulled away from Lakius. "Lakius, quick, heal yourself." "Yes, understood. Tia, could you help me pull these out?" Lakius spoke as if nothing had happened. The terror of mind control made Climb tremble with fear. Just as Tia was about to do it, Evil Eye raised her voice to stop her in her tracks. "Don't. If you inflict pain on her now, you'll be treated as a hostile and the magic may be dispelled." "Lakius, sorry, but pull them out yourself. Those shouldn't have pierced too deeply. Its purpose was only to inject the poison, so the needle itself isn't too thick. It's the type that would be rendered ineffective if you were wearing armor." "I know, but pulling it out myself will still require a bit of resolve." Lakius bit down on her lower lip and pulled the needle out. She then began to cast healing magic on the hole. "Kugane, open the window and let some air in. What should we do about the blood on the floor?" Most of it was absorbed by her dress, so not much made it onto the floor. "No need to worry about it," Renner replied calmly. Everybody other than him was speaking in such a tranquil manner that Climb felt like what he was witnessing was an illusion. It was as if he had been transported to an unfamiliar world. Whoa! Completely unshaken. "I knew from the start that you had guts." "I do not think so," Renner said with a puzzled expression. "I just felt that everyone would not just harm each other for no reason at all, but mind control is really scary though." "Climb, what did you think about this?" "Yes, I had the same thought." "So, could you tell us why you did this?" "What if I told you that I won't? Are you not the least bit apologetic that you have soiled this room?" Evil Eye appeared to be laughing behind her mask. "All right, nothing I could say about that. The reason is simple. Compared to the kingdom or whatever else, we believe our companions' lives to be far more important. That's about it. Defending the capital was ONI boss decision anyways. We were against it deep down from the start. But if we told her that, this dumb ass would definitely say, then I will defend it on my own or something. So, we decided that our only option was to forcefully take her away, but daylight kidnappings aren't so easy. Neither did we have confidence in our ability to trick her into leaving too, so, though we must apologize to Your Highness the Princess for what we've done, we had to exploit this opportunity. Tia and Gagaran shrugged in agreement. This must have been a collective decision made by Blue Rose barring Lakeyus, of course. Brain still had not returned yet, so Tina must be keeping him busy. But no matter what, this was far too excessive. Hey that's what I said as well, but these guys. It would be bad if she got on high alert after rejecting our suggestion. To catch an ONI, to catch Lakeyus out for sure required her to be completely off her guard. This is me speaking from experience. So there is a whole system around this. We used 5 types of poison, didn't let her wear her gear, used debuff magic, and yet still had to rely on luck to see if we could charm her. That was why we had to go through all of this trouble. If even one of those elements was missing, we would have failed. Now then, Evil Eye clapped her hands together. After Tina comes back, we'll head back to the inn with teleportation, pick up Lakeyus equipment, and teleport out of the city. Evil Eye looked towards Climb and Renner. Oi, opportunities like this won't come twice. You know I could take you guys along with me, right? I'll be frank with you, this country is doomed and the fate that awaits the princess of a doomed nation won't be a pretty one. This might be your last chance at escaping. Climb couldn't help but look towards Renner. Wasn't this exactly what he had hoped for? If it was teleportation, they could escape even if the city was surrounded. Plus, what Evil Eye had said was the truth. Whatever fate awaited Renner would not be kind at all, nor was there any other way he could foresee the situation playing out. After all, their enemy was a nation of undead that trampled over the innocent. I wish to ask a question. Where will you be heading to? Well, first things first, we have to leave this country. About that, we'll probably be heading northeast, I think. If we kept moving in that direction, there is a country that fell into ruin long ago. The capital there will be heading to the ruins cleansed by fire. Since that place is quite a ways away, we will have to teleport multiple times. In any case it's a faraway land, one that none of you have heard of. Is that so? Renner slightly lowered her head. Was she hesitating? Not long after, she lifted her head as if she had made a resolute decision. Thank you, but I cannot go. Is that so? Evil Eye did not continue speaking. Panicked feelings began to arise in Climb's heart. If that was her decision, then Redner's fate was set in stone. That was all he could think of. True loyalty. Was it not what the members of Blue Rose had demonstrated? Should he take Renner to safety, regardless of whether he had to resort to violence or not? To escape the frustration welling up within him, he looked towards Renner, whose smile told him that she understood him completely. This was the expression that graced Climb every time she was about to lay down the truth. Climb. As royalty, I must fulfill my duties even if it costs me my life. He felt as though he had just been punched. While Redner's existence as a person was important to him, of equal value was her status as his royal leech. In these situations, having to attend to one's royal duties wasn't a good thing at all. Yet, Renner, as royalty, as one who cared for her own people, was still willing to stay true to her royal status till the end. Compared to him, someone whose thoughts were solely on survival, how magnanimous was she? Climb made his resolve. His responsibility in the end, will be to let Renner live for as long as possible, even if only for a second more. He will die at the hands of the Sorcerous Kingdom's army, serving as Redner's shield till the very end. At the same time Climb steeled himself, he heard Evil Eye quietly say, "How rowdy." Knocks came ringing from the door as it opened. Stood outside were Brain and Tina, holding filled trays. "We found and brought some desserts over. Because the guy next to us had a bone to pick with me, it took a while. Were we able to make it? What the hell happened here? Although the windows were open, Brain was still able to pick up on the faint smell of blood that lingered. He shifted his center of mass downwards as he carefully looked around the room. Lady over there. There's blood on your clothes. Did someone suspicious show up? No. Don't mind it. Just ask Her Highness about it after we leave. Gagaran interrupted Lakyus to say. Perhaps he still felt uneasy. Brain shot a glance at Renner. One could sense the question, is everything all right, from his eyes alone. If Renner had responded in the negative, he would have probably unsheathed his sword. Everything is fine. There is nothing to be on guard for. Brain's gaze turned to Climb. Climb replied in the same manner as Renner. Is that so? That's good to hear then. Ah, right. Brain Unglaus, I have a question for you. Want to get away from this place? What? Upon hearing Evil Eye's question, Brain began to survey the room once more. What are those two planning to do? Brain answered with his own question as his gaze swung towards Climb and Renner. His lips curved into a smile after Evil Eye shook her head. Is that so? If that's the case, no matter what, I would not have chosen to run away. There is no point in it anyway. Honestly. I said back then that I'd choose the path of least resistance. Now it looks like that was right on the spot. Really? I thought you'd respond this way. Guess I was right. The members of Blue Rose gathered around Evil Eye and suddenly vanished as if they had already bid farewell. All that was left behind of them was the smell of blood and black tea. This was supposed to be their final farewell, yet it ended so abruptly. But, considering the pain those two must feel when they have no choice but to separate, perhaps there was no better alternative to this farewell. However, those were Climb's thoughts, not Redner's. She must have been dealt a mental blow, so how should he comfort her? Climb stole a glance at Renner and saw that she was listless. The gentle smile that usually hung on her face was nowhere to be seen. It was like she had put on a mask. It must have had an extreme impact on her. Climb stood beside Renner. Princess, I can imagine the shock you must be going through right now, but... He could not finish his sentence. It was more accurate to say that he did not want to finish that sentence. While he wanted to say that he would stay with her till the end, how could he ever compare to that adamantite-tranked adventurer, who was both a noblewoman and Redner's friend? Still, he had to comfort the princess somehow, so he racked his brain. Maybe his intentions were conveyed well enough, because Redner's expression suddenly changed. It was back to her normal, gentle smile. I'm fine, Climb, never mind that. Brain-san has important matters to attend to, does he not? Ah. Then, Your Highness, Climb. The timing is about right. It's time for me to say goodbye. I apologize, but I will have to leave now. What was this sudden development? Climb could not understand what Brain was thinking, so he asked a question. Where are you going? I plan to challenge the Sorcerer King in single combat. I'd most likely lose, but I should be able at the very least cut down one of his subordinates. Brain took off the sword he kept by his waist side, threw it towards Climb, and said, I'm returning this. What are you talking about? The only one fit to wield this sword is the one who inherited Stranov-sama's will. Brain-san. Oi, I told you back then, didn't I? I am not inheriting his will. First of all, this is one of the national treasures, right? It's not befitting someone as lowly as me. Princess-san, sorry, but please do return this to His Majesty. I understand. Princess-sama. Climb, Brain-san has already made his decision. As expected of Princess-san, you're a good woman. That said, I don't really understand women anyway. How do I put this? Brain stood upright. This is probably my last farewell. Princess, I have thoroughly enjoyed my time here. Climb back then, I was lucky to have met you and Sabas-san. It resuscitated me, and I am grateful for that. Brain turned his back on them and began to march forward. You and Gazef, it was my honor to have met the both of you. As those words fell, Brain's silhouette disappeared behind the other side of the door. How did it end up this way, Sorcerer King, if only you didn't exist? Everything around Climb was being destroyed. Everything other than what was most important to him had been taken away, and even that might not be long for this world. Her time was running out. Climb, I want to hand this sword off to Father Sama first. The depressive mood had gotten a hold on him, and those words managed to pull him back. Indeed, until that moment came, he had sworn to give his all to her, to save the woman who had saved him, to serve the person most important to him. Say, that, this, The sounds coming out of Redner's mouth did not match the atmosphere of the room just then at all. Can I hold the sword for a moment? Okay, yes. After he handed over the sword, Renner drew it out. It is quite heavy. Renner handed the sheath to Climb. The blade of the razor edge was honed and could cut through armor like paper. Before Climb could say it's dangerous, Renner began to wave the sword around in the air. Climb was a little shocked. Indeed, because of the weight, her movements were wobbly, causing the tip of the blade to nick the floorboard. That was purely because she did not have enough strength to wield it, because her training still shone through her stance and movements. He could feel the sharpness of the blade from afar. If a man without experience were to swing the sword around, he would not have been able to make the sword gleam the way it did in her hands. I'm not too suited for this. And no, not at all. I believe that if you trained more, you should be able to win against me in a duel. You jest. Plus, it is unlikely that I will ever hold a sword again. Renner sheathed the sword after Climb passed it to her and handed it back to Climb. Now then, let us head to Father Sama's side, but before then Renner looked at herself. I need to make some preparations. Brain Unglaus walked through the empty streets of the capital. Usually these streets would be bustling with life, yet today not another soul could be seen. Everyone was hiding in their homes out of fear for the Sorcerer King, but Brain knew that would not bring them salvation. Brain was around Renner for long enough to know that the Sorcerer King had no reason to not destroy the capital. However, if someone were to ask him how can we be saved, he would not know how to respond. If everybody coordinated and ran from the capital in all directions, surely some of them would make it out alive. That was the only answer he had. Brain looked towards the buildings along the street. Every door and window was shut tight. They must have been nailed shut from the inside, so there was no easy way in. Now, behind those doors there must be a few suicides or even entire families dead. It was impossible for that to not be the case. Rumors had already conveyed the terror inflicted by the Sorcerer King's army. He thought about how this situation could be turned around if God was willing. If every citizen in the capital could rise up for vengeance, though it would be useless, it would probably give the enemy a good scare. But for that to happen, someone had to unite the people under one banner. If it were the princess, she could probably achieve it, but she did not seem like she wanted to make such a move. If it was not me here, but him instead, would things have turned out differently? Perhaps. He knew very well that they did not have any chance at victory in a battle. Brain saw it in his eyes when he led the army of 400,000 away. Yet he could not look past the 0.01%, no, the 0.0000001% or even 0.00000000001% chance that they could win. Zanak may have led them on a suicidal mission, but it wasn't for a pipe dream. He had just acted according to their best bet in that scenario. Just like what Brain was about to do. Brain laughed in his lonesome and felt something. Has the air changed? Nothing had changed in actuality. The capital still smelled the way it always did, but there was a noticeable difference. This was something a warrior could come to understand after experiencing multiple near-death battles. It was somewhat different from a pungent smell, it was a sort of psychological smell. It was the same smell he smelled back when he and Climb looked towards Erantal's night sky. The smell of loss and defeat. Has the Sorcerer King's army finally made their move? That was the only reason he could think of for such a sudden change. An opportunity had come. If Brain were to not use any tricks when approaching the Sorcerer King, the probability that he could make it to his side was really low. No, that was an understatement. It would be correct to say that he did not have a chance at all. However, there was a chance that he could accomplish his goal in the midst of the chaos of battle. Of course, that depended on the security situation of the enemy's camp. Still, to trample over a city as big as the capital would require breaks in formation and subsequently, lowered guards. Brain stopped walking to mull over his next moves and saw the buttresses turn white. It was as though white paint had been poured over it. Wails could be heard from afar. This was the start of the siege. The wails had come from the temporary shelters built for refugees from other cities near the buttresses. The enemy's target had to be the castle, so there probably won't be any refugees running towards Brain towards the castle. What should I do? Would it be better to abandon the initial plan once the siege began? His initial plan was to get out of the capital first and wait for the moment the enemy's army entered the capital. He was planning to slip past the army in the chaos of the siege to get closer to the Sorcerer King. However, if the enemy had already made their way into the capital, it would be better for him to hide himself for now, wait for the army to pass over, and then go out of the city walls. But if he did that, there was a high chance that the Sorcerer King might choose to leave his encampment. He had to first figure out where he was so he wouldn't waste time running towards nothing. Perhaps he could hide near the castle and wait till the Sorcerer King led his army inward to strike. Well, in any case, all of these plans rely on me hiding myself. That said, he would not have to perfectly mask his presence like a rogue or assassin. He should be fine as long as he hid out of the enemy's sight. While he considered where to best hide himself, the city gates began to crumble. The white shrapnel being splintered off the gates reflected light in such a brilliant and beautiful way that Brain could not help but stop and admire the sight, even in this situation. Was that some kind of skill? But if he thought about it, he was about to make an enemy out of the Sorcerer King, one who could summon all sorts of deplorable beings. Nothing should be out of the ordinary for him at this point. A tiny dot stepped over the collapsed gates. It only appeared tiny because it was so far away. Adjusted for perspective, it must be a giant compared to the average human. Even though it had stepped over the threshold, no soldiers were rushing over to stop it. There could only be one reason why. They were already dead. Brain's entire body began to shudder. That had to be a super monster or something. The being's figure slowly began to increase in size, its stride slow and steady. Brain's expression became contorted. This was a being with overwhelming physical strength, so its speed should be on par. To advance through an empty street shouldn't take it too much time, so why was it wasting so much time? Ah, indeed. They had already breached the capital's defenses, so the ensuing massacre should be easy for them. They could take as much time as they want. It was then not strange for the enemy to be at ease. However, Brain squinted and looked towards his slowly approaching yet still far away opponent. This was the street where he was picked up, forcefully pulled along by Gazef. This was the street he ran down with Climb to raid the Eight Fingers facility, where he met Sabas. This was the street he led the children destined to become the next warrior captains down. This road was now being stomped upon carelessly by a monster. The road Brain had walked down with everyone he held dear was being stomped on. Unforgivable. Brain changed his mind. He no longer gave a damn about the Sorcerer King. Right here, right now, this monster in front of him. He swore to make it pay.